Welcome to the Recovery Toolkit podcast. I'm Richie. I'm going to be your host. Throughout the series, we're going to talk to a range of different people who will give you tools and tips to help manage your recovery. The podcast itself is being brought to you by Epic Restart Foundation, who are a national charity who support people to rebuild a positive life after gambling harm. So today I'm joined by Tony. Tony, it's a privilege to have you on. I know we met through cold water therapy, going in the sea, and ice guys at Tynemouth. But I don't really know that much about you. So this is going to be a bit of a discovery conversation for myself, and it could go off in any little tangent or direction. But I'm interested to find out about your journey to this point of your life. So do you want to share a little bit about like who you are, where you come from, kind of what your upbringing was like?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, it's a pleasure to be here as well, and thanks for inviting me. It's the first time I've ever been invited on a podcast, so it's breaking through a comfort zone for me as well, which I'm always keen to do these days. Unbelievably, I turn 60 next year, and I say that unbelievably not for anybody else, but for myself. I can't believe that I've got to that age for a variety of reasons. I still feel like a 14-year-old. And with the kind of experiences that I've had to get to this level and kind of age is quite incredible for me, really, I believe. But yeah, so born in Glasgow in 1965, and the youngest of four siblings. A mixed marriage, as they would be called back in those days. My father was second generation Irish. Brought up in the Gorbals. My mother was Scottish Protestant, middle class, kind of aspirational family, and it was a tempestuous and very difficult childhood, to be perfectly honest. It was an abusive environment, an environment that was soaked with alcohol and violence, and being the youngest, I kind of experienced the arc of my father's descent. He died when I was 18, and there were only 2 periods during that time where he was sober for 2 periods of 5 weeks. The rest of the time, all I knew him as a drunk, and he died a tragic, horrible death in a fire in the house. And but he was a cripple by that stage. He was 49, and he was a cripple through alcoholic neuropathy. I think that's the right term. So that was my kind of childhood, and I had all of the kind of lessons about why you shouldn't drink. It was there. It was written in blood all over the house, Yeah. And but growing up in a kind of hard working class environment, if you didn't drink, you were looked upon as being there was something wrong about you, something wrong with you. But I hung around with guys a couple of years older than me. So when I was 14, and that's probably quite old for someone starting to drink in Glasgow. But I got invited to like a party with German students who were over from, I think it was Hamburg. They were over from, and I get 2 cans of Carlsberg Special Brew, and my world changed in an instant that night. It was like paradise, Because growing up in an alcoholic environment, you suffer all the consequences of that, whether it's the violence towards yourself or the fact that you're kind of looked upon as being pretty poor, and suffered all of those kind of like jibes at school, the poorest boy in the school, and so you feel a certain level of kind of I guess. You're vulnerable, and you're treated as slightly different, and I've always carried that subsequently, is that feeling of being a little bit of an outsider because because of those early experiences. But so that was that sense of dislocation, I guess, from the rest of people, and then I had no guidance at all, so I kind of ran wild and free, and. So when I found drink, it was like, this just completed me. This was just an immense thing, and I loved it, and I had loads of great times in the drink from an early age. But it was as I reflect back, it was the high point of existence. There was nothing better than having a drink, and I looked forward to it. And it went from kind of weekly drinking to daily drinking. And by the time I was like 17, I was in the pub pretty much every night, And so those were the formative years in terms of drinking and getting hooked on drinking. And I first knew I had a problem when I was 16. I remember came back from a nightclub in the Plaza, it was called, in Eglinton Toll in Glasgow, a famous place. I think it's away now. But and the next morning, my mother came in and was like, "Are you okay?" And I was pins and needles all over, you know. And I was like, "I've got a problem here. I need to stop this, you know," because it was like happening so regularly, you know. But I never, obviously, you know. It was, So those were the early days. But I think it's important to put some kind of context around it for me as well to understand what really drove a lot of the drinking, as I've touched upon there. But because of those early childhood experiences and feeling less than everybody else, it gave me an inner drive. So I had this kind of real kind of fire in my belly to do well and to stick two fingers up to everybody, you know. And so when I got into my career, I was a manager at the age of 17 in a little boutique in the outskirts of Glasgow, and then I joined a good company when I was 23. And I had a family at that stage. Not the family's the most important thing in my life, but just to give an indication of how a guy who came from that kind of almost sense of, you know, not being good enough in any way and demonstrating through no academic results to speak of, any of that stuff, being a bit of a wild boy, to then being this really passionate, driven, ambitious sales manager guy who was like on the verge of becoming a sales director at the age of 27. So anyway, that was the kind of the motivations and the psychology. But I think that was really important was I met my wife when I was 19, and we were married at 21. Had my first kid at 23, and my second two daughters I've got at 27. So they were real big drivers for me in terms of like trying to create a good life and having the you know this lovely supportive family. So
just with that, Tony, I think obviously you've mentioned the alcohol, and do you think it was a bit of an obsession in the early days, like early in your late teens and stuff, 16, 17, when all that was going on? Would you say it looking back now, it was a bit of an obsession, or do you think it was kind of just the norm?
Yeah, it was. My drinking wasn't normal.
Yeah.
You know, I was the guy who was in the pub every night. You know, there was some of the guys would miss out on some of the nights. You know, so it was, and again, I think there's a biological element to that as well, and I think that's, you know, there's no surprise to me why I'm in the sea every day, because it's the dopamine. There's something about the dopamine that drives the behaviour as well, and I'm sure there's a scientific explanation, but that's beyond me. And
then something else you mentioned there was you became quite successful, and you can't become quite successful at a young age in the field that you were in without also having a little bit of obsession about the work you were doing.
Oh, massively, massively. I was obsessed, and I was obsessed with football as well. Football, whether it was playing or watching, was my life. And then as soon as I had my family, that was a bit within that was my career, and my career was absolutely an obsession. You know, I was a 8 hours a week guy, traveling all over the country in meetings at 11 o'clock on a Friday night, and just all of those kind of crazy things to demonstrate that I was good enough, but underneath it all, feeling that no matter what I did, I wasn't good enough, you know, and that was something that persisted, you know, was that, you know, in whatever I achieved was never good enough, and I was never good enough, and it was a horrible equation, you know, and the only release and relief from that was getting absolutely pissed. And drinking for me was not about having a drink; it was getting oblivion, you know,
changing the way you feel.
Massively. And I always remember being at I think it was a deputy manager at the time, and being at an event when the national sales manager came round, and I had been so nervous during the day. It was the first time I'd attended one of these courses, and then that so feeling just so anxious and horrible that way. You just feel that you just can't express yourself. You know, there's no matter what's going on in your brain, whether it's good stuff or bad, you just have an inability to express yourself because you're so uptight. And occasionally it would affect my throat as well, and and trying to get words out. And it was this overriding kind of social anxiety and just kind of general anxiety. And then at the night time after we had a dinner, this national sales manager, big Glasgow guy, was a good big guy. He came down, and it's like, any of those authority, I had a problem. My father being a violent alcoholic, I had a problem with authority figures, male authority figures. Either I would be very fearful of them, or I would think that they were absolute arseholes and, be really down on them if I spotted a weakness in them, kind of thing, and it was a really warped psychology. But he was talking to us, and because I'd had a drink, I was a totally transformed person. I was only a couple of drinks, and people were saying, "Oh my God, who is this guy?" It was like I had totally transformed from being this tiny little kind of mouse in the corner to being this big guy, and that was what alcohol gave me, and that was. But then when you lose that, it's like it's almost irreplaceable until you reach a kind of maturity mentally that you can, and through support of other people, of course. So.
Yeah, definitely. I think what I'm hearing through all of that is the common themes of a little bit of obsession, a little bit of unhealthy behaviour with work, with alcohol, obsession with family, but yet trying to find an external validation for who I am and that I add value to the world and all of that stuff. And that's a very common theme with the people that we support and we work with, and the people that I see in addiction is until they start going internal and still they start looking at themselves and going, how do I feel good about myself? Yeah. And that's the massive question, isn't it, for a lot of people? Massively. And that's I always talk about doing the work. Yeah. People go, what's the work? And that's the work, is finding out how do you find self-love, self-compassion, all of those things that actually build people up from the inside. And then once you start living that way, you start attracting better anyway, don't you? You start attracting better things into your life. Yeah, definitely. So that was like through your 20s. Is it okay? Can I just come across? Of course you can.
The external validation, I mean, it's an absolutely superb term, and it encapsulates absolutely the people pleasing. Yeah, the people pleasing was an
obsession in itself.
The hypersensitivity. And that's ingrained from early childhood, in that abusive environment where you're looking and you're watching to see, changing facial expression, slight change in tone of voice, all of those kind of things. Then when you take on positions of responsibility where you don't feel good enough, and you're like, every decision you make, every comment you make, you're like, is that landing? Is that okay? And that is just, that level of pressure you put upon yourself and that intensity that you're dealing with all of the time is unsustainable. And eventually I fell over. But yeah, that's it's a wonderful phrase, and
and through my journey, I can see where I'd done so well, I got so far, and then I was like, I need more validation, I need more praise, I need more, and I'm not quite getting it. So I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to jump ship. I'm going to leave before people cotton on to me being not good enough to do the job. And that was all internal dialogue that kept us jumping around from jobs to jobs. And people always say I used to fall in shit and come out smelling the roses, because every time I left a job, I went into a better one. And I blagged my way into them. I say I blagged my way into them. Again, that's because at the time I didn't have the self-confidence or self-worth to think that I deserved it. But I've managed to progress and still progressing now, which is amazing. But when you look back, it's like, that's exactly why that happened, and you can pick it apart. And I think it's nice to be able to sit here now. I sit here now saying that, but there's still times now where I go, oh, am I needed? Am I needed in this job? Like, shall I just go and find something else, and do something else? Because there's still that little child inside us that sometimes needs that, like, well done, Richie. Well done, you're doing all right. And that love and compassion. And although I had it as a child, there was always that, like you see, people pleasing. There was always a little bit of us that didn't quite feel right in the world. And that's where Yeah, that was my early
Yeah.
days as well. So
Yeah.
I totally relate to everything you've just
And
said
it
there.
doesn't matter, or it didn't matter what anybody else said. It couldn't overcome that internal voice, you know. So if someone said, "Oh, you've done amazing, you're doing brilliantly with that team, that's incredible," you know, there would be no kind of accepting that.
How do I do better?
Yeah, and it was, they must be lying, they must be wanting something.
Yeah.
So again,
Yeah.
growing up in that environment gives you a real problem with trust, because you really struggle with trusting people, and you think that everybody's got an ulterior motive, you know. So so that took a lot of inner work as well, and that, you know, that'll be a work in progress for the rest of my life. You know, you can't undo. Growing up in that environment, you're just set back a little bit further than the vast majority of people, but it doesn't mean that it's insurmountable. You know, you just have to do more work. You know.
Yeah, 100%. So coming through your 20s, your 30s, what kind of went on there for you?
It was in this job that I had, I got involved in this massive grievance case against a new senior C-suite team that came in, whose behaviour, well, you know, that's a whole other thing. I was perfectly right in what I was doing, but anyway, I got myself into a situation where I just didn't have the resilience to deal with it, and I was still drinking through that period of time, drinking heavily through that period of time as well. And so I hope I've given a sense of this feeling of being uptight, and that you can't continue with that, you know. And as soon as you've got something which is just a bit beyond what you're capable of, because you don't have those resources, you've not built those levels of resilience through the normal way of looking after yourself, caring, nurturing yourself, all of those things. All that you got is, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, you know. And so there's so much self-hatred, self-loathing, that when something major happens, you're just incapable of dealing with it. So I had what would be classed as a nervous breakdown, and that became, you know, that was absolutely facilitated through heavy drinking, and I tried to take my life through taking pills, but I was off the scale. I was just all over the place, you know. And again, as a boy from Glasgow, you just would never cry. You know, I was in floods of tears, and you know, all of this stuff. And you know, I still feel incredible shame about those things, and what I put my wife through, and you know, I had young kids at the time. Everybody looking in from outside would say he's got the perfect life. You know, the big house, big cars, and but just felt absolutely hideous. And that was 1998, and that's when I first went into the Rossetti studio in the centre of Newcastle. And had my eyes open to honesty, you know. I could hear, but I'd never really got the message. It was more kind of like, well, I'm on antidepressants. I need to do something to stop the drinking. It was like just, and the suicide attempt was not a serious suicide attempt. It was a cry for help. There's no two ways about it. But I just didn't know where I was. You know, I was lost. And anyway, you know, I you know, and again, I don't want any of this kind of. I hope I'm not projecting any of the stuff from childhood in a self-pitying victimhood kind of way, you know, because it has.
It's just finding a way of coping, though, Tony, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, you found a way to cope, and you found a solution to a lot of the problems that were going on for you internally.
Yeah,
you know, and I often talk to people around like basic human needs.
Yeah,
you know, and 9 times out of 10, when you speak to somebody, you'll hear their story and you'll hear part of their journey. And you can find when the basic human needs weren't met.
Yeah.
You know, and that's ultimately how it manifests. And this manifests in lots of different ways and lots of different people.
Yeah.
And I always say to people, no one's to blame for that.
Yeah.
That's not a blame game, you know. And some people want to blame other people, you know, and I just think they just haven't got to the point of taking control of that.
Yeah.
Because whilst you're still victim and whilst you're still in the blame game, you've lost all hope of sorting it out, you know. And like you get to a point, though, don't you? Like you're talking about now. I got to this point where it was like, I need to do something.
Yeah.
I need to do something different.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And so the recovery, I was off work for 6 months, and I stayed sober for a good few of those months. My memory's a bit hazy. I've lived a few years, so getting the chronology right is a bit more challenging for me than probably most people. But anyway, I went back out drinking again. You know, it was I had a social circle which was all drinkers, and football lads, and still played football in the northeast when I came down.
And when you went back out, Tony, were you going back out with the belief that I've got it under wraps now? Is that kind of where you went out, or were you going back out going, I'm just struggling and I need it?
Yeah, no. I think it was
a bit of belief.
I'm okay. I'm not, and obviously the prospect of being the same kind of individual as my father, who I absolutely detested, and I love Josh Conley's work. I love that it's okay to hate the bastards, but that for me that works up to a point, but that point's absolutely valid, and for me to think that in any way, shape or form I was an alcoholic, like him, was terrifying, So once I kind of get my shit together again, it was kind of like, well, I'm okay, and back out drinking again. And also the fact is that I loved it, and it gave me relief and all of those kind of things, Yeah,
and something else you mentioned earlier was resilience.
Yeah.
Like I honestly believe lapses, relapses, going back out, whatever it is, how you want to phrase it, whatever you want to say, that's just another opportunity to build more resilience. It's another opportunity to have a look in the mirror. It's another opportunity to learn more about what's going on. But it is ultimately part of the journey for so many people. And there's no shame in it. There shouldn't be any shame in it. I think sometimes there is. It's stigmatized a little bit sometimes. But I want people to talk about it. And when people talk about it, it offers hope and inspiration to other people that are going through them periods, because I always say every new attempt has better chance than the last one. And you just never know which attempt might be the one when you get it. And that's pretty much a message that I hope people take from what you're saying is,
definitely.
It's just part of the journey.
You
then got to a point where in and out a little bit. And then eventually it was...
Yeah, I went back in again in 2000, so it wasn't a long period of time that I was out for, and I got a sponsor, and I was really committed to doing this. I got a brilliant sponsor, and he was really helpful, really, just pointed me in the direction, gave me so much wisdom as well, and it was an older guy, because I had this affinity with older guys. I think I was wanting a replacement figure. A father figure, and he was great. He took me through the steps, and then I was fixed again, wasn't I? And I was fine, and that lasted for 18 months, and I was back out again, and the chaos continued on and off, and I would go off go back into the rooms again, and then go off it, and then doing the 90 meetings in 90 days, and I get sick and tired of doing the 90 meetings in 90 days again, and I was really committed to doing it, and I got to the point, in my 40s where I was like, the thing that I always remembered about AA was I used to go to a meeting in Morpeth on a regular basis, and I was coming away from it, and I'd be full of this, aren't I the sober guy and all that stuff, and then deliberately driving down Bridge Street so I could look in the pubs, and getting that, say, fucking hell, I wish I was back in there, So it wasn't. There was part of me it was working, but part of me it wasn't. It wasn't really getting to the root of it, and I wasn't strong enough. I wasn't resilient enough to even with the support of brilliant people, and I would never slag off AA. But ultimately, it wasn't the route for. And I love it.
It's just part of the journey, wasn't it? And and I say this to people all the time. Everything serves you at any given time that you're trying, and it would have served you for a period of time, but then actually, what's next? I need something more. And I was the same. I was like, oh, that's good. It's helped us. What do I do now? Where do I go? Where do I get the next bit? And I call them golden nuggets. Where's the next golden nugget? Where's the next bit of wisdom? Where's the next bit of, finding out more? And I think that's, and I'll always have that. And I love that. And that's probably a little bit of an obsession now, Tony, if I'm honest. But actually, I can live with that.
So, I could identify loads of that. But I loved a lot of the kind of pearls of wisdom from me, and the kind of this stuck with me as well, and it's always a good point. It's just when you're having a shit day, is just to remember where you were and the support that you were given as well. that was good. That bit there is just shit, so that'll probably need to be taken out because I just lost my thread totally there. But
we're definitely leaving it in, Tony.
So that got me up to the point of another mental health crisis point in 2011 when I was really heavily drinking again, and I had a period of getting involved in fights in bars. I had this thing at the back. I'm not a fighter, never have been a fighter, honestly, man. I could get blown over, but when I would get drunk, I would have this thing at the back of my head that I was some kind of hard man, and I've no idea where it came from.
Because you're from Glasgow.
Well, yeah. But anyway, I ended up, I got an ashtray in the head,
right.
And I get the scar in the head, and I go to my work, I was still committed to my work and all that stuff, although I threw lots of sickies. Sorry, former workplaces. And I would come up with the most convoluted stories about falling over the cat with a tray in the kitchen, and this is what caused it, and then the next week I would be, a couple of weeks later, I would come in with another scar, and it was like I'd fallen, and I had genuinely fallen in the house drunk, and it's like going to A&E, and they're like, oh, it's another incident involving alcohol. And I remember being up in Edinburgh on one of the nights out, and with this scar on my face, and it was at like a morning drinking bar, and this guy coming up to me and going, "Someone headbutt you, mate?" Hey, that Edinburgh accent, no. You fell then, So it was like I was getting to that stage where I was just following all of the kind of tropes of what it is to be an alcoholic, and I got to the point where I couldn't trust myself outside because I had this rage from this incident of getting hit that I thought I would take on the biggest guy in the pub, and my mates were like, "Oh, would you just behave?" I was just a nuisance. I was a pest. Nobody wanted to know me. I was a dangerous drunk to myself and to other people. So I ended up just drinking at home, and that's just horrible. And I remember seeing a photograph of myself, and my eyes had gone. Like however much I'd had to drink, and it reminded me so much of my father. It was his eyes that and the eyes were always that kind of indication of the. You've lost connection with everything else, and you're in a dangerous place, and that was something else that I kind of kept at the back of my head. So I had this other mental health episode was under treatment from a psychiatrist, and all of those kind of things that come along with suicide attempts and taking antidepressants, all that stuff, and then I was beaten, and I know I'd been in AA and I'd said all of the things, I surrender and I hand over to God and all that, but I hadn't really, and I didn't think I could, but I just knew I got to that point where I couldn't do this anymore. I couldn't try and go off the drink anymore. I just had to finally stop, for myself and for my family, and I kind of got my shit together in my 40s, but it took me my late 40s, but it took me another 3 years to stop completely,
And what was the thing that helped you? What was the pivotal moment, do you think, or what was the method, or what was the way?
So I was out in Australia, so I'd got my shit together for this period of time, was out in Australia, and then came back, and it was a bit of a dream to go to Australia, and had a good job out there. And when I came back, the dream was over, and I started drinking it heavily again, and then got to the point where I just couldn't do it. I knew the AA hadn't worked for me, so I went through kind of like searching for everything to see is there any other way. I was on Antibus as well, and then drinking on that, and having a big red face and the sweats and feeling hellish. So that didn't work as well, and then. I found this online. It was the Sinclair Method, and there was a documentary. I can't even remember the woman's name. But anyway, it was this Dr. Sinclair who'd come up with the idea, and it was called pharmacological extinction, the Sinclair Method, which basically meant that you took a pill any time that you drank, and the whole philosophy behind it was to try and get you into a position where you can control your drinking. So that
Cool story, that, isn't it, Tony?
Yeah, absolutely. So
why would you not want to try that?
Well, yeah, but it was kind of mad experience, because you would take this pill. So the first one I took was, and I used Access the Alcohol Services in Blythe, and they were absolutely brilliant as well. Really supportive, really facilitated it. A little bit of counselling, and but more importantly, yeah, we understand that you're kind of invested in this, so we'll support it, because it was kind of like off script that they would have to provide this medication. So I went on to this nalmefene drug, and it didn't work. I had loads of really shit side effects. And then I went on to naltrexone. So you take the pill about an hour before you start drinking, and then what it does is that you drink. So you maybe drink 4 or 5 pints, and you've got no effect at all. So it breaks the anticipation of that you're going to get the buzz and the dopamine. And then ultimately over time is that you can just take your pill and you just drink. So you can go out and drink socially and take the pill, but it has no effect. So all you're doing is you're drinking and you're getting all of the poison in your system without any of the benefits. So you go, what's the fucking point? You know, it's like, and I did that for 3 months, and it kind of coincided with the birth of my first grandchild, and that was a big motivator for me. And I, you know, you're just engrossed in all of the material that you're reading. Is that, you know, and I was reading kind of academic studies on it as well, and it's like, you know, the studies with rats is, find an alternative. You know, if you give a rat an alternative, they won't go to the bit that presses for the alcohol. You know, give them stimulation. And then, so you know, I was looking at all of the kind of psychotherapeutic treatments, and started investing heavily in myself. But one of the things that I always remembered about AA was the first step was that we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, and I was working through stuff which was about agency, and it didn't gel with me. Maybe in a spiritual sense I get it, but in a practical sense I didn't get it. I thought it was disempowering. So I kind of went, I flipped that for me, and it was, no, I have to take 100% responsibility. It's nobody else. And there's no victimhood, there's no blaming childhood. Other people have had much worse circumstances and have come through it. And, you know, people who were on the streets, you know, and in a really bad way, were near death's door with alcohol, and they managed to get it, and they managed to recover. And they were great inspiration, as was everybody who's come through that journey. That if anybody can do it, you know, there's no reason why you can't do it yourself, you know. So I was fully invested in it, fully motivated in it, but I needed more support, and I started to look at more kind of psychological support as well. And I did an amazing course with psychology at the Coast, which was mindfulness, self-compassion. And that was about, you know, treating yourself in a way which is as it says, you know, compassionate to yourself. Actually, begin to start to like yourself a wee bit.
It's a light bulb moment, that though, Tony, isn't it? Yeah. I think I work with so many people that are in recovery, but they're still self-loathed, they're still super critical, they still beat themselves up, they're still their own biggest critic. Yet the most empathetic people when they come to supporting others. You know, and the struggle to have that relationship with themselves. And a lot of the work we do at Epic Restart Foundation is about trying to build a relationship with yourself. And once you start doing that, like you've done on that mindfulness self-compassion course, you know, I love that word, self-compassion, because that's when the magic happens. You know, that's when we go internal and we start going, actually, I'm doing all right. You know, and one of the big things I like to encourage people to do is just to write down 3 positive things from every day. 3 things that have been successful, 3 good things that have happened today. And once you start doing that, you start building evidence. You start building evidence that actually, I'm an RE person, you know what I mean? I'm doing okay in life. You know, and there's a famous saying, something along the lines of where your attention goes, your energy flows. I think it was Tony Robbins that said it, but it's so true, isn't it? If you want to focus on self-loathe, self-pity, beating yourself up, that's how you're going to constantly live your life. If you want to focus on building evidence of success, of you know, being a nice person, of doing nice things, of being kind and honest and all that, you can find it. Just wherever you want to put your attention. That's not. It's a lot harder to do in reality. But it's that simple.
And I absolutely agree 100% with that. And that linked into something else that I was doing as well, which was internal family systems therapy, stuff, the Richard Schwartz stuff. Which was understanding the different parts and then trying to integrate those different parts that are within me. So knowing that I still have the little child, the little innocent boy who's been abused, the 14-year-old delinquent who wants to fight the world, the executive, who's trying to do the best for his family, the ice guy who's like, trying to, to build community and all those kind of things.
Yeah. Just on that, Tony, before you go any further, you mentioned internal family systems.
Yeah.
So when I first heard the term internal family systems, I was like, oh, it's all about the family and it's all about the relatives and parents and child. So I just want to clear that up, that actually it's not, is it? Internal family systems is about different parts of yourself. And
absolutely.
Understanding them different parts. And how actually all of them different parts play a part in your bigger whole life.
Yeah, definitely.
And then learning where they can add value and understanding how to manage and control and cope in all of them different parts of you. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to clear that up because I know some people will be going, well, what is it? But we've worked with a girl called Madeline who's fantastic, and she does a lot of IFS stuff, internal family system stuff. So there is in our community app, which should hopefully be released by the time this podcast comes out. No pressure to those working on it. There'll be a workshop on that. So people might want to go and refer to that and get a little bit better understanding, because it is quite important, isn't it? It's like quite liberating piece of work.
It's fundamental to understanding how your brain operates, and to have kind of dialogue between the different parts of your brain, and then have some kind of executive function kind of act as a peacemaker between them and say, right, well, you could have a little bit of this if you give a little bit of that, It's because my life I was an absolute dichotomist. It was either everything one way or nothing, It was total extremes in terms of thinking. Whereas this just gives you that little bit more balance, and understanding of yourself, and again linking in with the mindfulness, self-compassion is, well, treat yourself well, You're doing your best under difficult circumstances, as everybody is, and there was a guy, one of those self-help gurus, I've done everything in self-help possible. We've got all of the bookshelves are full of it, But there was a guy, Peter Crone, and his kind of watchwords were like, "You're amazing, you're absolutely amazing," And actually, I write about this because I do a lot of writing through my studies and so on. And I do the internal dialogue. You're amazing, you're fucking amazing. No, you're a dick, And then the opposite voice comes in, and it's those competing factors. So, but
that's the reality, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's the reality. There is competing voices. What do you want to listen to? Do you want to listen to the one that's going to beat yourself up, or do you want to listen to the one that's going to build yourself up? And that's a choice, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. But I think humour's such a big part of that as 100%. Well. See when you can laugh at that critical voice, you're a dick. And make it into a little bit of a joke, is that you're not trying to put me down again, are you? Come on, give me a break. But yeah, the point about listening to the positive voice is absolutely imperative,
Yeah, doing some of that work. Something I think is really important as well, Tony, is understanding self, so self-awareness.
Yeah,
how did that?
Yeah.
How did your self-awareness increase by doing that type of work that you were doing on yourself?
Yeah. I think it's really important. I used to, and sorry, I do go off on a tangent, Richie, but I used to always say that I don't have much of an ego. I don't really have an ego. And all I had really was just a very fragile ego. Mm-hmm. People could say something to me and it would haunt me, or I would say something and then reflect back on it. And it was just I never had a strong enough sense of myself. And I think it's only once you develop that sense of self in a way that's sufficient for you to be comfortable with yourself that you can then start to let it go and go, actually, get out of the way. Your purpose here is it's not about you. You've been put here on earth to do something, whether it's something creative or whether it's helping people. You have a purpose elsewhere. Stop being so fucking self-referential. Self-absorbed. But you need to put the work in to develop that sense of self in the first place, and creating that feeling of self-worth, and that's a lifetime's work. That's not
100%.
And there's I listen to the guy James O'Brien in LBC, and he has this kind of barometer test it does 52-48, which is all based on his stuff about Brexit. I'm not going to go into that stuff, but and it's like, you're never like 100%. Oh yeah, you're 52-48. So 52-40. Can I go 52 on the positive side? Can I listen 52% of the positive side? And then that starts to dominate, and that's great, you know. And but recognise the 48% still there, you know. And I think when you're developing that sense of self, as you go, for 52%, I'm amazing. 48%, I'm a bit of a dick, really, isn't it? Yeah. Right, okay, well, we'll keep working on the amazing stuff, you know. And
I think it's so true, though, isn't it? I think so many people are waiting for 90%, 95%, 99%.
Yeah.
I need 100% guarantee that this is going to work.
Yeah.
You know, and
and
all of that sort of stuff, where actually, if you're 51, 52, 53%, you're closer to the working than not working. So give it a go.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
And I think there's so many sort of scenarios where that can come in and help people, especially in recovery. I think it's a really important fact to make. Tell us a little bit about Tony now. What goes on in Tony's world now? How do you look after yourself? What does recovery look like? I know you're passionate about your studies and you've put a lot of time and effort into that. But what does your life look like today, Tony?
Honestly, I have got absolutely zero reason to have any negativity in my brain at any point, because my life is just like perfect. I had a little bit of a moment a couple of days ago where I was lying in bed, I was waking up and I was like, you're just the luckiest guy ever. You know, I've got an amazing wife, I've got 2 amazing daughters, I've got 4 amazing grandkids. I work with dogs, right? Dogs are the most amazing animals. I love them. So I work on, if I'm kind of slightly off, I go doze. I work on how's my dopamine levels, get in the sea. How's my oxytocin levels, hug your family, hug your dogs. How's your serotonin levels? What are you working on? What's your goals? What's your endorphins? Get out and do some fitness, do some running or do some strength training. And I've got the facility to do that. And I see like the ice guys in particular is quite a broad, diverse community. And I see people having to work, you know, really long hours. And I've been there, I've done that as well, of course, you know, but I think I am so fortunate that I can, you know, well, he's done 856 consecutive swims. Well, it's easy, I've got time to do that. And I live 10 minutes away from the...
Hold on a minute, I know,
Tony. It still takes commitment to do it.
You've just dropped something in the conversation there, hoping that I wouldn't have heard it, I think. 856 consecutive swims.
Yeah.
So that's 850. I'm just saying this again because this is remarkable. This is commitment. This is consistency. This is getting something from it that actually benefits you, benefits your community, benefits people around you. You know, so Tony has done 856 consecutive swims in the sea.
Yeah.
In cold water.
Yeah.
Of some capacity.
Yeah.
Consecutive.
Yeah.
That's not just in the summer. That's through every type of weather possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's some commitment.
Yeah, it's a way of life. It very, very rarely does it feel like, oh, this is too onerous, you know, because if I'm off colour, there was one period for 2 weeks where I think I maybe had COVID, and it was like a real bloody wading through treacle to get there. But it builds resilience, and now I get to the point of, if I don't do it, and this is the addiction stuff, you know,
obsession still.
Yeah, absolutely, a really healthy obsession. But what I get back from it, you know, it takes me about an hour by the time I leave and by the time I get back, and it gives me the motivation and the drive and the sense of well-being. It gives me so much benefit in my life that, you know, it feeds through to everything else as well, you know. And whether that's swimming first thing in the morning, which is predominantly what we do, or later on, it's just it works. It works for me.
What else have you got out of that, Tony? What else have you got out of doing the sea dips and?
Well, yeah, I've got arthritis. I've got psoriatic arthritis, which is an autoimmune condition. Which again, there's a lot of people who, you know, kind of like traumatic childhoods, all that sort of stuff that have autoimmune conditions. Yeah. I'm pretty certain there's a link there. My brother's got it as well. No surprise. My sisters have got different variations of IBS and things. But so yeah, it from a immune point of view, I take medication, so it lowers my immune system, and the sea absolutely boosts my immune system. There's no question about that. I had a little bit of Raynaud's disease as well, so the white fingers, and and by going through swimming every day, circulation's absolutely amazing. So again, it's just physically the benefits are there. Mentally, honestly, I don't think I could have done the masters in creative writing at Newcastle University, and that was massive for me to do that. I'm still get that voice in my head on occasion.
Am I allowed to call you a mature student? Is that the right terminology?
I push the boundaries on that one, don't I? And I think they're going to try and create a new category for me. I'm definitely the eldest there. But so by knowing that I go in the sea in extreme temperatures, it could be -10 wind chill. We're walking across that, and I say we because there's 2-3 of us that swim on a daily basis at Camas, Ross and James, and there's other guys that do it now, Big Ian down in South Shields as well as. So that resilience of being able to do that shows that you can go through, break through the comfort zones, and then I just apply that in other areas. Well, can you do this? Can you come and actually sit and do a podcast with Richie and go outside your comfort? Oh yeah, I'm putting myself in the sea every day, so I can do it. And as I say, by when I'm doing the masters, the sense of walking into an environment where it's like people who have a lot posher than me and a lot more kind of academically qualified through the kind of standard school, university, undergrad, then doing their masters. It was kind of like daunting, but that gave me that. But also, and I don't want to sound a bit wanky, but there's a real spiritual element to it as well, and a real kind of philosophical part for me. So that whole point about the alcohol making me feel whole, making me feel like the person that I was meant to be, this confident. When I'm in the sea, I feel that sense of wholeness. I feel that sense of unity with something much bigger than that, and that completeness, And through my reading and studies, I believe in that kind of connection with everything, non-dualism. Which is when I think of the ocean, I don't think of the constituent parts of the ocean where there's a seaweed, there's a seabed, there's different variations. We're all part of the ocean, and I think that then feeds through into the way that I kind of view life as well, is that we're all part of it. So people that maybe are behaving in a certain way, that's just a some particular problem with that particular person at that time, but we're still connected. We need to find a way to overcome that, whatever that barrier is. So we're all part of it. We're all in the same ocean. No,
100%. I think, like in AA and places like that, they talk about higher power, don't they? And understanding higher power and fellowships and stuff. And it's hard for people to comprehend, isn't it? But what you're basically saying is there's a higher power. There's something bigger than you. You're just part of the bigger ocean, for example. And that's your kind of connection with nature and the world and everything else. And I think it's important people hear that, I think, because it's quite profound in terms of you are just part of the bigger,
absolutely,
the bigger, and once you realize that you're not the center of the universe, and everything doesn't revolve around you, you can then start, well, actually, I might show a bit self-love and self-compassion and work on myself a little bit and change my beliefs a little bit. Something we ask everybody, Tony, is what's 3 to 5 things that are in your recovery toolkit? So tell us 3 things that you spoke about cold water therapy. What else do you do that keeps you well and keeps you on the right path?
Well, I've got spending time with my family is the ultimate. That's why I do everything. Really, is to get the benefits of that, and trying to be an important part of their life. That's where I get most enjoyment from life these days, and particularly when you're blessed with grandchildren, it's amazing to see them grow and develop. So spend as much time with them as possible. In terms of the creative aspect of my life, is something which is developed over the last few years. So I write a lot. I am unpublished, so I'm not saying I'm a writer.
Anyone who can publish them? Got something to publish, Tony? Is this a plug?
I'm working on something. I'll have a manuscript ready. So I write every day. It's like my non-negotiables are that I swim every day, I write every day. And they really keep me kind of focused and stop my ADHD brain go off in tangents, and I get plugged in. But also LinkedIn, I'm very much a creature of routine. So I'll go for my swim in the morning, and then I'll come back and I'll do my breath work, and then I'll do my yoga, and all of those kind of I know that I've got it kind of a decent platform for the day, you know. So they're the kind of the key things that I do on a regular basis, you know. And I like to have some goals as well.
How important do you think that is? Having a goal, something to work towards?
Yeah, definitely really important. You know, it charts your progress, really, doesn't it? So it just keeps me focused and keeps me out of trouble. You know, I've got my business, which I've been running now for about 9 years. And that's great, and I'll never retire. I can never see myself retire. And I work with dogs. Why would you ever want to retire from that anyway? And I work with my daughters as well, which is just an immense privilege to be able to, and a great little team as well. So that for me is gives me that focus. And there's other people who can do retirement brilliantly, and you know, play golf and things. You know, it's for me, it's I need to be engaged all the time, and I've got a life now where I've got all of those things, and it's kind of, I pinch myself. It's like you're in a really good place, and I worry that it's all going to come crashing down around me. You know, there's always that fear, but the self-destruct element of me doing that is reducing day by day, and every day that I stay sober, and every day that's the foundation for me. Is as long as I don't pick up a drink, as long as I don't do anything that's going to go really against my values, I'll be okay. And I've got all of those other brilliant things. Yeah,
I love that, Tony. I think that is a great place to bring us towards the end. But I can't end this podcast without asking you about your T-shirt. Life ain't always empty.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that.
It's a line from a Fontaine's DC song, A Hero's Death. But they're a great band, just really lively music. But the message of the song is that you just live your best life, you know, and just do what you're put on this planet to do, you know, and be a good person. Just try and do the best things that you can, and appreciate the things that you have in life, and therefore life ain't always empty, you know.
And I think that's a perfect way to end it, Tony. And from everything you've said today, I think you're doing exactly that. So it's been a pleasure to speak to you. Thanks for your friendship. Thanks for giving up your time. And good luck for everything you do in the future.
Thank you very much, Richie. It's been an absolute honour.
Thanks for listening to the Recovery Toolkit podcast. If you took something positive from it, then why not subscribe? If you or somebody you know has been suffering gambling-related harm, why not head over to our website where you can join our community? The link is in the show notes.